7 most emotional gaming cutscenes of all time. Games have become an everyday part of our lives, and it's no surprise they're becoming more realistic by the day. Nowadays, the average person is likely to experience a roller coaster of emotions while playing them. Today, we'll discuss the 7 most emotional gaming cutscenes of all time, which were so powerful that they made even the hardest of hearts cry. Number 1. The Last of Us. Goodbye, Sarah. Naughty Dog's award-winning The Last of Us is one of the most soul-crushingly emotional titles in recent years. While any gamer can point to innumerable tear-jerking instances throughout the game, one of the most difficult occurs right at the beginning. The main plot of the story is based 20 years after the outbreak of the infection. The first scene takes place on a fine when Joel and his daughter Sarah are at home and all hell breaks loose. They proceed to flee the city with Tommy, Joel's brother, and become engulfed in the panic of people escaping the aftermath of the chaos. Sarah is injured in a car accident and they must abandon their vehicle. Joel and Sarah are caught between a government soldier and the freedom beyond when they finally find some semblance of relative safety from the massive crowds. The soldier is given orders to kill Joel and Sarah despite the fact that her injuries are unrelated to the infection. The soldier fires and Sarah dies in Joel's arms, prompting Joel to make a costly decision with Ellie later in the game. This is the pinnacle of shock and awe storytelling, and it's only the beginning of the game. Joel's pain and complete betrayal by another human is indescribable. It's only fair to hope that if we were in the same situation, we would react differently, but we digress. Number 2. Red Dead Redemption. John Marston's death. Given how cinematic the Red Dead Redemption games are, it would be surprising if they didn't contain some emotional moments. John Marston's final stand is one of the most emotional scenes in the entire series. The many actions of John Marston had to come back around at some point, and they do in the final moments of Red Dead Redemption. Just as we'd taken a liking to John Marston throughout Rockstar Games' excellent Western adventure, the developer throws us for a loop by making him the victim of a brutal attack by government agent Edgar Ross and his men. "Keep the doors closed and locked and your mother inside," John advises Jack. At this point, it was clear that something unusual was going on. As his family tries to escape, John finds himself alone against an armed force, and despite the player's best efforts, he's gunned down. It's a heartbreaking moment, especially given what Marston went through to make things right so he could be with his family. However, his death is not in vain, as his son Jack eventually tracks him down and blows him away in a fitting final shootout. Justice, and without a doubt, the most emotional moment in gaming. Number 3. Final Fantasy VII. Death of Aerith. Aerith's death may be the most talked about video game death of all time, and for good reason. The plot follows Cloud Strife and his friends as they attempt to stop Sephiroth from destroying the planet and using its power to become a godlike being. It was released in 1997 and was considered one of the most revolutionary games of the time. The entire scene appears out of nowhere and is completely beyond the player's control. While players have complete control over which abilities their party uses, it's safe to say that Aerith was the most commonly used healer. Cloud gets hypnotized by Sephiroth and loses all control. As Cloud prepares to strike Aerith, his party intervenes to prevent the atrocity. Cloud comes to at the last second, stunned by what could have happened, but relieved that Aerith is safe. Aerith smiles as she opens her eyes after praying and looks at Cloud. Sephiroth falls from the sky above and stabs her with his Masamune sword before they can reconnect. Sephiroth begins to tell Cloud about his plans for the reunion, but the distraught hero is uninterested. He's so heartbroken and bereaved that another person he genuinely cared about has died. Number 4. Life is Strange. Chloe's sad fate. Anyone who's played Life is Strange understands how much of an emotional roller coaster the game is. There are some iconic and shocking moments in the game, but one of the saddest occurs after Sam messes with the flow of time a little too much. Going back in time to save Chloe's father, whose death started this terrible chain of events in Chloe's life, may have seemed like a good idea to Sam. However, Sam discovers that Chloe's life has changed. In episode 3 of the game, Chloe becomes paralyzed. It's upsetting enough to see Chloe, who was once carefree, deteriorate into a shell of the person she once was, but things get worse. During the player's brief encounter with Chloe, her paralysis leads her to some dark places. In episode 4, Chloe tells Sam about her mounting hospital bills and asks him to euthanize her after an accident. The scene serves as one of the game's most powerful reminders that even minor changes can have serious consequences. Number 5. Shadow of Colossus. Agro Falls. Losing a video game companion is almost always an emotional experience. Wander's horse plummets to his death after a long game of fighting colossal bosses. We're talking about Wander's trusty steed, Agro. Shadow of the Colossus may be the only game in history to elicit such a strong sense of isolation while playing. As a result, you become even more bonded and close to your horse companion. The game's final area is a desolate wasteland of ruined buildings and destroyed flora. After climbing to the top of a high wall, the duo is confronted with a long, unfinished bridge leading to an old temple, the final resting place of the Colossus. Aggro, as usual, shows no fear and dashes across the bridge, determined to assist his friend Wander in completing his most difficult task yet. The weathered bridge begins to collapse behind them as the two crosses. Aggro accelerates immediately. Aggro realizes he's not going to make it more than halfway across the crumbling bridge. The selfless horse bucks and tosses Wander in the air with bravery not even found in most humans. Wander lands safely on the other side of the bridge with a thud, just in time to see his devoted Aggro fall hundreds of feet in the chasm below. Number 6. Gears of War 2. Dom and Maria. Most gamers may scoff at the idea of a standard third-person shooter having any kind of particularly emotional moment, but those gamers are missing out. One of the most difficult scenes to watch in gaming is Gears of War 2. Dom finally locates his wife Maria after years of fruitless searching. She's being held in a locust prison camp, and when Dom opens her pod, she appears to be the lovely and healthy woman he's always known. Everything appears to be fine and dandy when the two reunite, but Marcus snaps Dom out of it. Maria is actually disheveled, non-communicative, and in a vegetative state, as we discover. Dom, understandably, is at a loss for what to do about the situation. But in the end, he decides that he must put her out of her misery. This scene is difficult to watch for a variety of reasons. Dom's incredible outpouring of emotion for his beloved Maria, the dark atmosphere, and even Marcus's genuine emotion all contribute to this being one of the most difficult gaming moments to sit through. Number 7. The Walking Death, Clementine and Lee. It takes a lot of strength not to cry during the final moments of Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1. The player spends the entire season following Lee and Clementine as they form a beautiful bond. Lee, a man we first see in the back of a police car, is controlled by the player. Lee assassinated a state senator who had been having an affair with his wife. Despite the fact that the main focus of the gameplay is that the player makes decisions that affect the narrative, the player is unable to save Lee, who's bitten at the end of the season. The only option for the player is to have Clementine kill Lee or leave him to turn into a zombie. Lee stumbles beside Clementine in the emotional scene. Lee offers Clementine some advice before asking her to shoot him. In a game full of emotional moment, this stands head and shoulders above anything else the series has done. With this, we've reached the end of the video.